Do you ever have those dreams where you're running away from something, but you can't move fast enough? Or you're trying to get somewhere, but it's like you're moving in slow motion? Dreams are how your unconscious communicates with your waking mind, leaving cryptic clues to help you figure out the things that are bothering you or holding you back. I used to have this recurring dream where I was floating a couple of inches above the ground. But it wasn't a free feeling like flying, it was arduous. I would have to propel myself off lampposts and other solid objects to try to get to where I was going, instead of just walking there. Although both the slow-running dream and the inconvenient floating dream are expressions of anxiety or stress, they mean different things. The thing chasing you in your dream doesn't always matter. It symbolizes a stressful situation you want to escape, and the feeling of moving too slowly is an expression of feeling powerless in your life. So when I saw the way Kiki drifts and careens across the sky, bumping into things, I instantly understood what she was dealing with. These are the dreams people have when they don't know who they are, when you're drifting through life instead of walking steadily towards fulfilling your goals. I find this so much more relatable than some other animated films. Disney and Pixar films are really the world standard in terms of high-quality animation techniques. But I'm not sure their films are the best thing for my 3-year-old. Disney films usually start out as all fun and games, but by the end, everything is on fire, or they have to impale a subversive female. The stakes in films like Kiki's Delivery Service and My Neighbor Totoro can seem low, but they're so much more real than a supervillain who wants to destroy the universe. And I'd argue some of these Studio Ghibli films are not only better for young children, but also more mature. At the end of My Neighbor Totoro, for example, 5-year-old May has wandered off and got lost. The whole village desperately scrambles about trying to find her. If you've ever even imagined losing sight of a child, you know it's horrifying. Much more so than any alien creature. There is no villain in Kiki's Delivery Service. It's about a 13-year-old witch who leaves home to spend a year in training. This sounds kind of like negligent parenting, because when I was 13, I could barely cook anything more complicated than ice. So the idea of a 13-year-old living on their own for a year feels dangerous. And Kiki finds that the world is kind of indifferent. The people she meets aren't as caring as she hoped. She even runs away from a police officer to avoid her parents finding out she almost caused a traffic accident. Later that day, she runs away from the siren of a police car thinking they could be hunting for her. This reminds me of this George Orwell essay called Such Were the Joys, where he talks about skipping out of school one day and heading into town. As he rounded a corner, an adult passed him by, making eye contact, and Orwell thought this random adult would report back to the headmaster of the school. This is what it's like being a child. You think adults have magic powers, that they share a network of spies, which is aware of your every move, or that they can read your mind. I remember staring at my teacher when I was about 10 years old, trying to figure out if they could really read my thoughts.
I know you can read my thoughts, Bart. Just a little reminder. If I find out you cut class, your ass is mine. Yes, you heard me. I think words I would never say.
So we see Kiki is still a child and naive in a lot of ways, but she's also incredibly hardworking. And that, to me, is a fascinating character. Someone with flaws and virtues all mixed together in a complicated way. Miyazaki, the director, has said in interviews that he wanted to make a film that would inspire young people to be less awful.
プロデューサーの娘さんがいまして、ちょうどキキよりちょっと上ぐらいだったかな。で、その、生意気な手こずる娘を相手にしてですね、で僕は直接会ったこと一度しかなかったんですけど、プロデューサーからよく聞いてましたから、それと戦って その子たちが喜ぶ映画を作ってみせるってこう横島な願望を持ってこう作った映画です。
But this film is also autobiographical. Hayao Miyazaki is now world-renowned as a filmmaker, particularly in Japanese animation, where he is considered the paragon of the form. In 1997, his film Princess Mononoke became the highest-grossing Japanese film of all time, which is a remarkable achievement. But then a few years later, in 2001, his next film, Spirited Away, surpassed Princess Mononoke to become the highest-grossing Japanese film. He even won an Academy Award for Spirited Away, but in the ultimate badass move, refused to attend the ceremony in protest of the Iraq War. But he didn't just fall into this success. He had to get to that position. He spent several decades working in animation for various studios, and frequently found frustrations in trying to get films made or finished, and several of the films he worked on were abandoned. This is what those dreams of arduous floating express. The feeling of being at the mercy of capricious forces rather than a master of your own destiny. Here are a couple of key events in Miyazaki's transformation from a frustrated subordinate to the legendary director he is now. His first feature-length animation, The Castle of Cagliostro, was an adaptation of a long-running manga and anime series, Lupin the Third. But his second feature was based on his own manga, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, and was wildly popular and gave him the financial footing to found his own studio with his colleagues Isao Takahata and Toshio Suzuki. Starting their own studio is the symbolic leap Kiki takes when leaving home, like going from adapting other people's stories to directing your own. I have no doubt Miyazaki had stress dreams like this before starting his own studio. But his last film, The Boy and the Heron, shows a different kind of stress. It's about a wizard alone on the crest of a hill who keeps a fantasy world alive through constant vigilance and balancing this precarious structure. And this wizard hopes that a new generation will take on this duty and keep the world of bizarre animal people alive. This is very clearly an expression of the kind of anxieties you would think are unique to being such a world-renowned creator and studio head. In reality, lots of people can feel a similar pressure. When I first became a father, I felt this incredible sense of responsibility, like only my ability to anticipate any potential dangers could prevent the whole world collapsing. But I don't think of Kiki's Delivery Service as a surrealist film exactly, just because parts of it feel like a dream. Its use of dream-like feelings highlights the relationship between the more experimental side of an art form and the more commercial sides, and how these sides are constantly conversing with each other. Surrealism started as an art form and later cinema aimed at academics and intellectuals, which was and continues to be rejected by larger mainstream audiences. The average film watcher despises how David Lynch films don't make sense as more traditional narratives. A lot of people actually find David Lynch films offensive for this reason, like it's a personal insult. But you wouldn't have these kinds of non-Euclidean kaleidoscopic spaces in Doctor Strange without surrealist cinema experimenting with mind-boggling imagery. And this is what the avant-garde does. It goes first, cutting a brave path through untamed territory. And the mainstream has always taken the work of the avant-garde, smoothed its rough edges, and made it more palatable for a mainstream audience. Sometimes it's hard not to think of it as just theft. There was something of an outrage in the artistic community in 1998 when Volkswagen took Gillian Waring's artwork and turned it into an advert. The original exhibit used a simple premise of real people holding signs which expressed their innermost feelings, to show that people have inner lives you wouldn't necessarily know about just from looking at them. Volkswagen took this concept and turned it into a striking and memorable advert. Volkswagen quickly pulled the advert following widespread criticism and legal threats. But this was only a small part of a very common trend for experimental art to be appropriated for commercial purposes, like taking Orwell's 1984 and using it to sell the idea that buying a computer from one of the world's most profitable companies is some revolutionary act of defiance. You can actually use surrealism in any mainstream film without confusing the audience, as long as it's clear that it's a dream or fantasy sequence, and the dream ends. In Sam Raimi's Darkman, the background cracks into raging flames to show the uncontrollable fury of the character. Darkman did quite well at the box office, but 12 years later, Raimi used a similar effect in Spider-Man to show the character's burning anger and descent into madness. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, as you may already know, was one of the highest-grossing films of all time. This shows that mainstream audiences can accept abstract or surrealist imagery if they can manage to connect with the film in a more traditional way, where they feel a connection to the characters and the plot. You can even have grounded emotional drama, fantastical departures from reality, and surrealism all in the same piece, without alienating audiences. But when a film is totally dreamlike, this can cause frustration. Audiences tend to prefer clear goals for the protagonist, and when these are absent, the audience can get lost. Despite the fact that cinema of all genres has always experimented with striking visuals, which could be described as surreal or abstract, Japanese art, particularly anime, has played a massive part in the adoption of surrealism in mainstream cinema. Surrealist art was actually illegal in Japan shortly after it was introduced in the early 20th century, mainly because authoritarian governments tend to insist that all art is used as propaganda. So an inherently anti-capitalist, albeit ambiguous movement like surrealism needed to be suppressed. And perhaps because of this, it was widely adopted as a tool in manga and anime when this ban was lifted after the war. Almost every anime show starts with a 90-second music video using beautiful abstract imagery to express the inner workings of the characters. Anime typically had much smaller budgets than prestigious American animation like Disney films. In terms of production values, it was closer to the Flintstones than Snow White, using repeating animation cells to keep costs as low as possible. So anime creators used abstract imagery to create style far beyond what their budgets should have allowed. Abstract imagery like speed lines gave the impression of movement without the expensive frames of animation. And sometimes the lighting and color of a scene would transform into an outrageously stylized dreamscape of garish colors and profound shadows, which is something very difficult to achieve in live action. Animators took advantage of not having actual lighting rigs casting on figures to create impossible lighting schemes, or silhouettes against a light background. One of the advantages of these silhouette techniques, besides looking incredibly stylish, is it's also easier to animate because you don't have to draw as many details of the moving characters. This is something easier to do with animation because cell animation like this is typically composed of animated cells on a static background, so completely isolating the characters from the background or changing the character into a being of just color and shadow is a cinch. You can do stylized silhouettes in live action as well, of course, where it evokes a kind of shadow play. Some of these feel very much influenced by anime, while some others predate the Western importation of anime style. In the 90s, shows like Powerpuff Girls seemed almost like a parody of anime, but were part of a process by which the style and abstract techniques of anime became normalized and integrated into Western pop culture. And by the time you get to something like Encanto, it feels totally normal to use surrealism to express a character's feelings. But I don't think the mainstream only ever plagiarizes from the experimental side of the art form. Cinema, like all art forms, is a dialogue, and the vocabulary of the art form expands as the conversation continues. For example, King Vidor's 1928 film The Crowd used an image of endless identical desks to show the dehumanizing nature of modernity and capitalism. Billy Wilder took this image for his 1960 movie The Apartment, but made it funny, expressing more comedic impotence than rage against the dehumanizing system. I don't think it's just the 32-year gap between these two films that makes their similarity okay. I think it's that both of these films are brilliant in different ways and express different things. King Vidor added this image to the vocabulary of the medium, and Wilder used the same image for a joke. Miyazaki harnessed the vocabulary of surrealism to express Kiki's psychic life. And what makes this so effective is the way it captures the mystery of her own thoughts. I said at the beginning that dreams are a way for your unconscious to communicate with your conscious mind. A lot of the time we don't know exactly why we feel a certain way, and it's a real skill to investigate your own mind and figure yourself out. So about 2/3 of the way into Kiki's delivery service, she loses her ability to fly. She never figures out why, and it's ambiguous for the audience. A number of things happen which could have caused it. Was it the feverish cold she caught? Was it the way her extra effort and hard work was completely unappreciated by the girl in the pretty dress who Kiki is envious of? Did this cause her shame and doubt? Was it loneliness and homesickness? Was it falling in love? We don't know. And that's how life is. One day you wake up and you've changed in ways you can't explain. Miyazaki said of this part of the film, we sometimes aren't able to draw something that once came so easily. We might even forget how we learned to draw it in the first place. I really don't know how this happens. And by the end of the film, Kiki's powers have returned, and she seems to have it all figured out. But this is never directly explained. It's up to the audience to find their own meaning in it. And that's another way that it's like a dream. Simon Critchley, in his book On Mysticism, says that we become mystics every time we fall asleep, when our visions are experienced as dreams, which call not for legislation or medication, but for narration and interpretation. And Carl Jung says there are parts of the unconscious which are incommunicable through language. Instead, the unconscious communicates through its own specialized language of symbols. Regarding the interpretation of dreams, Jung said, "It is plain foolishness to believe in ready-made, systematic guides to dream interpretation, as if one could simply buy a reference book and look up a particular symbol. No dream symbol can be separated from the individual who dreams it, and there is no definite or straightforward interpretation of any dream. Each individual varies so much in the way that their unconscious complements or compensates their conscious mind, that it is impossible to be sure how far dreams and their symbols can be classified at all." This is what makes cinema so special. It combines visual and audio, realistic and abstract art forms in a way which can speak directly to the incommunicable, mystical parts of you in ways that other mediums can't. There are innumerable books which can tell you the meaning of the symbols of your dreams, but they don't all agree. There are few definitive answers about these things in life, so like this video you've just watched, those interpretations should be used to add to your own vocabulary of how to understand yourself and how to create meaning from the things you experience. Kiki's delivery service is full of meaning, not just in the way her flying expresses her psyche, but the way it fits into my own story. I see in the way Kiki floats and drifts out of control the same difficulties I've had in my life, and seeing it expressed so artistically helped me develop the vocabulary to understand what my dreams were trying to tell me. That's what Kiki means to me, and I can't wait till my child is a little older and has their own words to tell me what Kiki means to them. Thanks for watching to the end of the video. If you found this interesting, please consider liking and subscribing.